So I was at Capitol Mall 2 months ago shopping for clothes. After a while, I noticed that my feet were getting tired, so I decided to take a rest at a bench that was nearby. At first, everything was fine until a few moments later when I noticed that I was getting extremely uncomfortable. At first, I decided to ignore it, but after a while, it got so unbearable that I just had to get off the bench. Later that day, I decided to do a little bit of research to find out why it was uncomfortable. I found out that there were little grooves in the bench that I didn't notice. And the purpose of these grooves was to make sure that I didn't stay on the bench too long. This is an example of unpleasant design. Have you ever had a similar experience to me, sitting on a bench and getting extremely uncomfortable by the minute? Or have you ever seen a bench with a strange armrest in the middle? Or maybe even that bench with no backrest? Welcome to the world of unpleasant design. The reason that bench has an armrest is to prevent people from sleeping on it. The reason that bench doesn't have a backrest is to keep you uncomfortable. Unpleasant design is everywhere. You may think that street lights are there to deter suspicious activities. They are these days, but back then they had a completely unrelated purpose. Unpleasant design is changing the world, and it's about time that we take a look at it. First, we need to take a stroll down memory lane and examine the history behind unpleasant design. Then we need to retrace our footsteps and figure out where unpleasant design is located. And finally, we can take a rest and examine the implications behind it. Let's take that stroll down memory lane. No one is for certain when unpleasant design began, but it can be traced all the way back to the 19th century. London was having problems with people peeing in the corner of buildings, so they came up with urine deflectors, which were just long strips of metal that were placed on the sides of buildings. And as the name suggests, they would deflect the urine back into gutters that were placed underneath them. However, if you had your feet in the wrong place, you'd have to go home with your foot covered in urine. Also around this time, the communities began making rustic twig benches, which were only about 1 meter long, leaving very little room to sit comfortably. While unpleasant design was used in the 19th century, it was even more widely used in the 20th century. According to Selina Savic, when Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia, the government installed unpleasantly bright street lamps in the city of Visegrad. Their goal was to deter nighttime gatherings that could lead to resistance or rebellion. It would have never crossed your minds that at one point a street light could have been used to deter resistance. Let's retrace our footsteps and figure out where unpleasant design is used. Unpleasant design is everywhere. It's even in public restrooms. Some bathrooms have blue lights installed, and the purpose of these are to deter drug users from injecting drugs into their veins by making them harder to see. And while some use blue lights, some use pink lights, and this is intentional. The purpose behind these pink lights is to deter gatherings by highlighting blemishes on the face. People don't like to sit around with all their blemishes highlighted for everyone to see. With all these examples and more, it's pretty clear that cities use unpleasant design all the time. However, it's not just cities, it's restaurants too. Restaurants have a nasty habit of turning the AC up way too much. And they do it because they know that people don't like to sit around and eat in a frozen tundra. They want you in and out of your seat quickly. A famous story circulates in design circles that the plastic chairs at McDonald's are designed to be comfortable for a maximum of 15 minutes. These restaurants want you out of your seat and gone. An empty table looks appetizing to a group of people looking for a place to eat. Finally, let's take a rest and examine the implications behind unpleasant design. The goal of unpleasant design is to deter certain activities that are deemed undesirable but are not illegal. The implications behind a bench with an armrest in the middle of it is to deter people from sleeping on it. However, bad thing about this is that it only addresses a symptom of homelessness and not the actual problem. A bench with an armrest on it is not going to give the homeless a home. It's just going to send them down the street or to another bench. And if someone's desperate enough, it could cause them to break into a building for a place to sleep. The implications behind anti-dry paint is that it makes it nearly impossible to climb or vandalize. However, the bad thing is that if you paint in the wrong spot, you're going to have to wait 3 years because of its resistance to chemical removal. Classical music can be played to prevent people from loitering around. However, if this is played at the wrong shop, then it could seem off-putting to everyone in there. The implications behind blue light is to ensure that people don't inject drugs. However, this costs at the safety of the general public by reducing visibility, which could lead to stumbling and falling. Plus, it may not deter drug users at all. Towards the Heart writes that people attempting to inject under blue light may inject into an artery or surrounding tissue. Plus, due to the low visibility, they'll have trouble watching and monitoring the amount they are injecting, which leads to a higher risk of overdose. So today we've talked about the history of unpleasant design. We've retraced our footsteps to find where unpleasant design is used, and we took a rest to discover the implications behind it. As you leave today, I hope that you start to see unpleasant design everywhere, as I do now.